Hey, I'm Steve Laskovich of Luminous Works, and I have solved a problem that's bugged me for a very long time, and I want to share it with you. And that is how to take a photo and turn it into a halftone image. Of course, everyone learns how to do that. There are tons of videos out there. But these dots are not ordinary. These dots are actually little vector circles. Whoa, how did he do that? That's what I want to tell you. So let me undo that little move I just did there, and let's get started. So here on the left in Photoshop, I have a picture of the character Victor Laszlo from the movie Casablanca. That's right, he's the heroic character who, well, I don't want to give it away. You should see it. It's 80 years old this year, so enjoy. We're going to take that picture of him and turn it into those dots in a few ways. Now, when I first tried this, I found that there was a bit of funkiness in his cheek and on the side of his face in the final result. So I sought to help that a little bit. So in the original image I had here, I made that layer of Victor into a smart object. That is, I right-clicked and I chose Convert to Smart Object. Convert to Smart Object. I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it again. And I did that so that I could blur it. So let me show you that version. And you're thinking, well, Steve, how's that going to help? Well, okay, I didn't leave the whole thing blurred. I made a smart object and blurred it so I'd have access to a smart filter mask. So I was able to paint with black or white to hide the blur where I didn't want to see it. That way I get this more even gradation across his cheek for the lighting. And that helped the dot pattern look a little better too. So a small thing there. Then I took that whole thing after making a layer comp of each. Let me make sure this is set to the with blur. Layer comp. You can learn about layer comps in another video. They're awesome. Anyway, I made a layer comp. Then I took the whole thing, put it inside another smart object. That is, I selected all the layers and right-clicked and converted to smart object. And that is what you've been looking at right here, wherein I can actually choose, not there, Steve, you silly, but here I can choose which layer comp inside the smart object I want to use. So I want the one with blur. So here's Victor looking all like ready to do his duty. I'm not going to give it away. You got to watch it. And so he's ready to be turned into vectors. Now, thing is, if I went straight away and ran the filter pixelate color halftone filter, the problem is he would come out something like that, which you think, well, what's wrong with that? That's not too bad, right? The hair's a little dark, whatever. Problem is, those are just raster bits. Those aren't circles. Those are actually pixelated. And I don't want pixelated. I want vector circles. I'm going to need Illustrator for that. Well, I'm going to need Photoshop first and then Illustrator for that to make it even better. So in order to have real circles, especially in the hair where it's all blocked up, I needed to do an adjustment first. So there was nothing actually black. So I did a curves adjustment first. Let me show you what that looks like. I just took the darkest darks, moved them up a bit, a little experiment here and there, and back and forth. And another reason I make smart objects is so when I do one thing, like curves adjustment, and then do the color halftone filter after, I can evaluate and see how it looks. And if the curves adjustment was a little too much, well, I can go back and adjust it again and watch the color halftone change again in a few seconds. The goal of between the two was to see complete whole dots with just a little bit of space between them so that I know that when I actually trace this, tracing, I'm going to get little vector circles or at least vector blobs. Now, thing is, I tried to take this image and I put it into Illustrator to use the image trace feature. Yeah, it didn't come out so good. It was kind of messy. So I thought, okay, what can I do? Well, I know that in Photoshop, we can make a vector tracing of a kind from a selection. So I'm like looking at this. I'm like, okay, let's get a selection of all these little circles of various sizes and shapes. Well, mostly sizes. So here is my channels panel. And I know that if I hold down my Mac Command key or Windows Control key and click on the RGB channel, I've made a selection of all the white stuff. That is not the dots. Let me select, inverse that. Now I have a selection of all the dots. however big or small they are. And then I'll go from the Layers panel to Channels panel now to the Paths panel in Photoshop. And you see I already have one here, but I'm going to make that one go away so you can see the whole glory. So now I have a selection around all those little things, and there's a button at the bottom of the Paths panel which will create a path from my selection. Thing is, by default, it does a kind of crappy job. It would have lost all the teeniest dots, but I know a secret. Now you will too. You're going to hold down Alt or Option, depending on Windows or Mac. Hold down that key, hit that little button at the bottom, and you're going to set the tolerance to as low as it can go, which is a mere ½ pixel. Talk about tight constraint. That's as low as you can make it, so I put ½ pixel in there. I hit OK, wait some seconds, because that's a very busy selection. And in 4 to 6 weeks, we have a bunch of little vector shapes in the form of a work path. Now, Photoshop shows path edges as blue. That's why everything looks so blue right now. But how am I going to get this vector stuff over into Illustrator? A couple ways I could do it, I suppose, but there's an old one. In fact, that trick I just showed you, converting a selection to a path, is ancient. So is this. File, Export, Paths to Illustrator. That's been around forever. I choose it, and then I tell it what path I want. Right now, it's just a work path. I could name it if I wanted to. And I click OK, and I'll give it a name. And I'll put that on my desktop. Now, actually, I'll just go to Illustrator. Open Vector Laszlo 2. And you'll notice it says it's converting to artboards. That's because the version of Illustrator that file is like old, like version like 1 or something. Just crazy. Ancient. Doesn't even know artboards. So I'm going to make sure that there's an artboard around the artwork. And no one else. Just those. I click OK. Look at that. Isn't that perfect? You're thinking no. Let me do a select all. Oh, look at that. All those little circles. They're unpainted. That is no fill, no stroke. It's very disconcerting to open this file and see absolutely nothing. Well, I'm going to do a couple things with this file. I'm going to make sure that it's using color mode RGB, because that's what I usually work in. And then I've done a select all, so I did Command A or Control A, and then I can set the fill to black, and now I can actually see some dots. So now I got all these vector dots, and you think, you're done. Well, no, they're not quite the right size, almost, but not quite. And wanting them a little bigger to make the hair a little darker. But also, let me show you up close what they look like. They're not quite circles. They're kind of messed up. That's that ½ pixel tolerance that we set. So it's very tight, but those ain't circles. So I'm going to select all again, make sure they're still all selected, and I'm going to use an effect to convert them to proper ellipses. So under the Effect menu, Convert to Shape, Ellipse. Now, previously when I did this, I made sure I unchecked Preview, because I didn't want Preview checked because it slows everything down because there are so many darn dots. So many, in fact, if I adjust these values here, we would be waiting to go from one to the other for quite some time. I don't know why this effect always wants to make every object bigger. I don't know. I don't get that. So I'm just going to make sure I set both of these to 0, and then I can turn on the preview and wait the length of time it's going to take. And you see it broaden them a little bit too. And I could try to make them a little smaller, but it turns out the small dots are probably fine. The bigger dots are too big by a lot, but it varies. I can always shrink them or grow them later. So I'm just going to accept no size adjustment, even though it looks like there's a size adjustment. I'll click OK. But this is only an effect. I really want them to be ellipses. So I'm just going to go up to Object, Expand Appearance, and very shortly, they're all very much real ellipses. Now let me zoom out so you can see what this looks like. And deselect. Looking good. What's that about? I don't know. Zoom out, zoom in. Okay. There is our vector thing. Now, I like it. I think it looks just fine, just like that. That little spread that we got on those dots, almost like we printed them on paper with ink. That little bit of dot gain is appropriate. But if I wanted a little bit more or a little bit less, I could select all again, and we could use Object Transform Each. Again, I would do this initially without the preview checked, and I can adjust the horizontal and vertical scaling just a smidge, and that, because it's Transform Each, that would affect every dot individually. So I can make each one a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. Just for fun, I'll do that. Make them 5% bigger. Let me see what that does. It's going to be hard to see because they're all selected. Yeah, it's hard to tell. Let me hit OK, and I'll deselect. And maybe I even like that a little better. Let me go back to Photoshop, hide that path. And remember, back here under Layers, I have that curves adjustment active and the color halftone active. Let me turn those both off. And you can see that that is a pretty nice high fidelity dot pattern thing. And again, all those dots are actual real selectable vector shapes. Awesome. Well, if you want to learn more about Illustrator and its effects, or Photoshop and smart objects and smart filters, and so much more, head on over to luminousworks.com for either our online offerings or in person. I'd love to meet you.